It was raining hard. People hurried past the streets with umbrellas and coats. But one figure didn't move. She sat on a flattened cardboard box under a broken bus stop, holding a baby wrapped in an old towel. Welcome to Hearts and Billions, where the rich meet the broken. And one moment changes everything. Love, loss, redemption, all in one story. Subscribe to feel every heartbeat. Her hair was soaked, her eyes tired, and her lips trembling not from the cold, but from the weight of life. Across the street, traffic was jammed. Inside a sleek black SUV, billionaire Ethan Cole sat quietly, his phone buzzing with missed calls. He had just left another exhausting board meeting. To most people, he was a genius investor with no weaknesses. But today, he couldn't focus. Out the window, he noticed her. A woman, Yan, maybe in her 20s, she wasn't begging. She wasn't even looking up. She was just there, still, silent, shielding her baby with her body from the cold. At first, Ethan looked away. He'd seen 1,000 people like that in New York. He was used to it. But then, the baby started to cry a sharp, painful wail that pierced through the sound of honking cars and heavy rain. He looked back. For a moment, their eyes met, and something about her gaze froze him. It wasn't just sadness. It was something deeper familiar. He told his driver to pull over. The assistant in the passenger seat turned around. "Sir, we'll be late for your next meeting." I said stop the car. The SUV slowed to the curb. Ethan stepped out, ignoring the rain, walked straight toward her. She didn't flinch. She didn't beg. She just looked up, her lips trembling as she softly hushed the baby in her arms. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly, still rocking the child. "We're fine." "You don't look fine." He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope of cash, something he usually carried to tip service staff. He knelt down, handed it to her. "Get a room, food, whatever you need." She looked at the money, then at him. "Why?" "I don't know," he whispered. "You just remind me of someone." As he turned to walk away, a glint of metal caught his eye. Around her neck, barely visible beneath her wet hoodie, was a small, old locket. Something inside him stirred. He didn't know why that locket looked so familiar. But he knew this wasn't the end. This was the beginning. Ethan Cole had built empires, closed billion-dollar deals with a single signature. But that night, lying in his king-sized bed overlooking the New York skyline, he felt powerless. No luxury mattress or silk sheets could quiet his thoughts. He saw her again and again, Maria, sitting in the rain like she was invisible. The way she held her baby, her back arched slightly to shield the child. The way she didn't beg, didn't even ask. And then, that locket. The next morning, Ethan showed up at the office 2 hours early, but not to work. He called in a favor, pulled traffic footage from West 34th and Oak, between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock p.m. yesterday. "I need to find someone." His team gave him a look, but didn't question it. Within hours, his lead security advisor sent him a photo. Maria, entering a rundown motel on the city's edge. The timestamp was just minutes after he gave her the money. Motel Sunlight, room 9. Ethan drove himself, no driver, no entourage, just him, gripping the steering wheel harder than he needed to, trying to make sense of why this stranger mattered so much. He knocked softly. The door didn't open right away. He was about to turn away when he heard it. "Who is it?" "It's Ethan," he said gently. "From yesterday." Silence. Then a small click. The door creaked open. She stood there, barefoot on the cold tile floor, her baby resting on her hip. She looked less desperate, but still guarded, like a deer ready to bolt. "I didn't expect to see you again," she said. "I didn't expect to come back," Ethan admitted. "But I couldn't stop thinking about you. Or your daughter." He stepped inside. The room was dim and smelled faintly of old soap and something warm. Maybe she'd heated a can of soup. There were formula cans on the nightstand, a fresh bottle half empty. He noticed the baby's cheeks looked a little rosier. Today. Maria sat on the edge of the bed while Ethan placed a small paper bag on the tiny table beside her. "What's that?" she asked. "Unsure. Just a few things to help," he replied. "A phone, grocery cards, clothing vouchers, a safe place you can stay, and some money." She didn't touch the bag. Instead, she looked at him, eyes narrowing. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. Ethan sat across from her, elbows on his knees. "Because someone once helped me when I had nothing. Not with money, just a moment of kindness. I've never forgotten that feeling." Her lips trembled, but she held her gaze. Most people just look away, or act like I don't exist. I saw you, Ethan said. I see you. She blinked quickly. Her fingers reached for the bag but stopped. I don't know if I can trust you, she whispered. I'm not asking you to, he said calmly. Just take the help. No strings. Maria finally opened the bag. She pulled out the items one by one. When she saw the cash envelope, her hands shook. This is a lot. I can give more, he said quietly, if you ever need it. That's when Hope the baby let out a little yawn and curled against her mother's chest. Ethan smiled, and Maria finally did too. Just a flicker. Her name is Hope, she said. I gave her that name because I thought she might be the only piece of it I have left. Ethan felt something heavy press on his chest. It's a beautiful name. Then, just as he stood to leave, he glanced at her chest. The locket. That old, rusted silver locket glinted faintly in the motel light. May I ask, that necklace, where's it from? Maria touched it gently. It's all I have from my past. I was in foster care, separated from my brother when I was 6. This was the last thing my mother gave me. I don't even know his name anymore. Just that we were split up fast. Ethan's breath caught. He kept his voice steady, but inside him, something shattered. Do you remember anything about him? She shrugged. Just that he always held my hand when I cried. He told me I'd be safe. He nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. Maria gave a tiny nod, unaware of the storm building behind his calm eyes. He walked out of the motel room, heart pounding. The name, the story, the locket. It couldn't be, could it? But he wasn't leaving this to chance. He would find out. Because maybe, just maybe, the woman he saved wasn't a stranger at all. Ethan didn't go home. He sat in his car in the motel parking lot for nearly an hour, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing anchoring him to reality. His mind was racing, memories long buried now clawing their way to the surface. A locket, a girl named Maria, a separation. He barely remembered his mother's face, but he remembered her voice. Take care of your sister, Ethan, no matter what. He had tried, until the day social services split them up. They said it would only be temporary, that they'd be placed together again. But that day never came, and now, decades later, she might have been sitting right across from him clutching her baby in a dingy motel room, too afraid to trust anyone. He couldn't leave it to Hope. He needed proof. Back at his office, Ethan pulled out an old box from his private safe, dusty, untouched for years. Inside was the only thing he had left from his childhood, a photograph of 2 little children, a boy and a girl, about 5 and 6, standing in front of a brownstone building. She had curly brown hair. He had his arm protectively around her neck a shiny new locket. The same one. Ethan placed the photo next to a printed snapshot of Maria from the motel's security camera. It wasn't just resemblance. It was her. He made a quiet call to his private doctor. I need a fast DNA match, he said. Discreet, no record. I'll handle the sample. 2 days later, Ethan returned to the motel, trying not to seem too eager. Maria answered the door holding Hope, a towel wrapped around her shoulder. I didn't think you'd come back again, she said, with a tired smile. I brought some things, he said, handing her a baby care package, diapers, wipes, and a tiny pink beanie. Hope grabbed his finger curiously, and something warm surged in his chest. He gently set down a paper coffee cup on the table with a hidden DNA swab beneath the lid. They chatted briefly about the weather, shelters, things that didn't matter, but he couldn't stop watching her. Every movement she made reminded him of Samian he used to protect. Before leaving, he excused himself to the restroom, where he discreetly collected a strand of her hair from the brush on the sink. 3 days later, the results came in. Positive, 99.98% match. Maria was his biological sister. Ethan sat frozen, the printed results in his hands. His ears rang. Tears welled up but didn't fall. He had spent years building a life from nothing. He thought his past was behind him, but his past was alive in a woman broken by the world, raising a child alone in the shadows of the same city he ruled. He thought of her quiet strength, her refusal to beg, her ability to survive with nothing. She was more than a sister. She was a warrior. And now he had a choice. Tell her the truth, or wait. Because what if she didn't want to be found? Ethan stood at the window of his 52nd floor office, the DNA results in his hand, the city buzzing beneath him like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Maria, his sister, was alive. She had been living less than 5 miles from him. And all this time, while he had been winning awards and gracing magazine covers, she had been surviving alone with a baby, sleeping on streets, hiding in shelters, forgotten by the world. He felt sick, and more than that ashamed. All the resources he had, the billions in his account, and he hadn't found her sooner, hadn't even tried. He ran a tech company. He had tracked CEOs running offshore accounts. He had located lost patents in 3 continents, but he had never thought to search for his own family. Until now. That night, he opened a sealed box in his private library, the foster care files. Files he had requested years ago but never dared open. Too painful, too late, he had told himself. But now, he read every word. He learned that Maria was transferred 3 times in the first year. She had been marked nonverbal due to trauma. One home reported her as too quiet to bond. Another noted she often cried at night, whispering a boy's name, Ethan. He swallowed a sob. Somehow, she slipped through the cracks, adopted briefly, then returned, and eventually aged out of the system. No criminal records, no schooling records, past age 14, just ... silence. She had vanished. Until now. Ethan worked late into the night. He activated a full search through his Securitism legally and quietly. He wanted to know everything without tipping her off yet, not because he wanted to spy, but because he needed to understand what she had been through. He reviewed shelter records, hospital visits, police reports from abandoned cars and public parks, even social media posts from charities and street photography accounts. He saw her in blurry backgrounds pushing a stroller near a food bank, wrapped in a blanket beside a campfire under a bridge. Always quiet, always invisible. His heart broke a little more with every image. And then, he found something unexpected. A charity volunteer had posted a photo just 2 weeks ago.
A candid shot of a young mother picking up diapers at a local mission. In the photo, Maria was smiling just slightly as she held baby Hope in her arms. The caption read, "Sometimes the strongest people have the softest smiles." Ethan stared at that smile for a long time, not because it brought him peace, but because it filled him with purpose. That weekend he returned to the motel. Maria was surprised but not cold. She offered him coffee. Hope crawled to him instantly and sat on his lap like she had known him forever. "How's your week?" he asked gently. "Quiet," she said. "We might have to leave the motel soon. Rent's up again." "You don't have to worry about that," he said softly. "I can't keep taking money from you," she replied. "It's not a handout," he said. "It's a brother's debt." She blinked. "What?" Ethan almost said it. Right then. But he stopped, because part of him was scared. What if she didn't want a brother? What if the truth hurt more than helped? So instead, he handed her a new envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "An address. It's a small house I just bought in Queens. It's yours, no tricks. No rent, just a safe place." Maria stared at him speechless. "I don't know what to say." He smiled. "Then don't say anything. Just breathe." And for the first time since they met, Maria exhaled without fear. But Ethan knew the truth would have to come soon. And when it did, it would change everything. The house in Queens was nothing grand. No marble floors, no chandeliers, just a small 2-bedroom space with a porch that creaked when you stepped on it. But to Maria, it was everything. For the first time in years, she could sleep without worrying if someone would bang on her door, tell her to move, or worse, try to take Hope away. She stood in the living room with Hope on her hip, taking in the sunlight streaming through the dusty window blinds. It didn't feel real. She didn't know why Ethan was doing all of this. He said it was kindness, but this was more than kindness. This was love, and love like that always had a cost. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his penthouse with the DNA test results still folded in his pocket. He had gone over 100 scenarios in his head. He had rehearsed every word, but every time he saw Maria's face, so fragile, so guarded, his courage faded. He didn't want to break her, not now that she was starting to stand. That evening he drove to the house. No driver, no assistant, just him. Maria opened the door in a loose hoodie, her hair tied back. Hope was asleep on the couch, curled into a pink blanket. For the first time, Maria looked relaxed, like a woman who finally believed she was safe. "You hungry?" she asked. "I made some pasta." Ethan nodded and followed her inside. They ate quietly at the kitchen table, simple plates, mismatched forks. He couldn't remember the last time dinner had felt this real.
Halfway through, Maria looked up. Why me? He blinked. What do you mean? Why did you stop that day? You didn't know me. You could have just driven off. Ethan looked down at his plate, fingers tightening. I didn't know, he said. But I felt something. Like I'd seen you before. Like I'd failed you once already and didn't want to do it again. Maria's eyes clouded. That's crazy. I know, he whispered. And then he couldn't hold it anymore. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the photograph. Two children, standing side by side, one arm protectively around the other. He placed it gently on the table between them. Maria leaned in slowly. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. That's me, she said, breathless. And Ethan. Tears pulled in her eyes. She looked up at him. No, that can't be. That's not. He nodded. It's real. He reached into his other pocket and placed the folded paper beside the photo. She opened it with shaking fingers. DNA match. 99.98%. Silence filled the room. Only the soft ticking of the kitchen clock dared to move. Maria covered her mouth with both hands. Her whole body shook. She stood up fast, paced the floor, then sat back down. Tears poured freely now. I thought you were dead or lost. They told me we'd never see each other again. I forgot your face, but not your name. Ethan stood, unsure if he should reach out. Then she walked to him and hugged him like the little girl who used to clutch his hand in the dark. They stayed like that for a long time to siblings, broken by time, healed by fate. And in the corner, baby Hope stirred in her sleep, unaware that she had just reunited. A family dot. The photo lay between them, like a window to another lifetime. Maria's fingers brushed over the faded edges, her thumb resting on the little girl in the picture herself, barely 5 years old, her curls wild, her smile wide, her brother's arm protectively wrapped around her like a promise. She blinked back tears. I don't remember the day we were taken, she began, her voice no louder than a whisper. But I remember the cold and the fear. Ethan leaned in silently, not wanting to interrupt. He had spent his entire life building walls around his heart, but now, sitting across from the sister he thought he had lost forever, he found those walls crumbling brick by brick with every word she spoke. Maria's voice trembled, but once she started, it was like a floodgate had opened. They put me in a car with strangers. I kept asking for you. The woman in the front seat kept saying, you'll see your brother soon, but I never did. She looked up at him briefly, her eyes glassy. I waited. Every day, I waited. I thought you'd come for me, that you were looking, that you were just late. Ethan looked down, guilt tightening in his chest. I didn't know where you were. They never told me where you went. I was just a kid too. They said you were adopted. Maria nodded slowly. They told me the same thing about you. She stood up, walked slowly to the window, and stared out at the tiny yard behind the house. I bounced around so many homes. I stopped unpacking my bag. I stopped learning names. I learned to smile when it helped me and disappear when it didn't. Her shoulders tensed. One home was bad. He used to lock me in the laundry room when I didn't clean fast enough. I was 7. Ethan closed his eyes, his hands curling into fists on the table. I ran away after he threw my locket across the room and said, even your family didn't want you. That night, I slept behind a grocery store, and honestly, that felt safer. She turned to him, a small, broken laugh escaping. Isn't that funny? A kid thinking the street is safer than a home. He didn't laugh. She came back to the table, picked up the locket hanging from her neck. This is all I had left of you. I didn't even remember your name for a while. Just flashes. You always held my hand. You hummed songs when I couldn't sleep. You'd make silly faces to make me laugh when I was scared. She looked up at him, truly seeing him now. And now you're here. The man I looked for in strangers' faces. The one I hoped would remember me. Ethan's throat tightened. I never stopped hoping you were out there. But I gave up looking. I thought it was too late. It wasn't, she whispered. It was just in time. She wiped her face, and then sat up straighter. When I turned 15, I left the system completely. Lived in shelters. Slept in stairwells. I learned where to go for food, which streets were safe, how to hide my fear. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. I didn't even know how I got that far. I was barely eating. I thought Hope would die, but she didn't, she said, her voice softening as she looked toward the couch. where her daughter now slept peacefully. She came out screaming, like she had something to prove, and I knew then I couldn't give up. Ethan stood, walked around the table, and knelt in front of her. "I'm sorry I wasn't there," he said, his voice low, trembling. "I should have found you. I should have tried harder." Maria placed her hand gently on his. "We were both children, Ethan. We survived the only way we could. And now we're here." She took a deep breath. "And I believe that's not an accident. I believe we were meant to find each other again." They sat side by side as the room grew quiet. The only sound was the soft breathing of Hope on the couch and the creak of the old house settling. For the first time in years, Maria felt safe, not just because of the roof or the locks on the doors, but because her brother was beside her. She wasn't invisible anymore. And Ethan, for the first time in decades, felt complete. They had both survived the darkness, but now they had a chance to live in the light. The days following the DNA revelation felt like a dream Maria couldn't wake up from. And for once, she didn't want to. She had gone from surviving in a motel to sleeping in a real bed, under a roof that didn't threaten to fall apart. Her daughter had a crib. There were clean clothes in the drawers, warm meals on the stove, and the soft sound of a brother's voice filling the silence that had haunted her for years. But still, it didn't feel real. Not completely. Ethan noticed. He was patient, gentle but observant. He could see it in the way Maria still slept lightly, jumping at creaks in the floor, the way she kept her suitcase packed just in case, the way she looked at him sometimes, like she was waiting for this new life to disappear. So he planned something small but meaningful. It started with a knock at the door one Sunday morning. Maria opened it cautiously, hope in her arms. Ethan stood there, not in a suit or behind tinted glass, but in jeans and a hoodie, holding a grocery bag and smiling awkwardly. "I brought breakfast," he said. "And a few people." Maria raised an eyebrow, unsure. Behind him, a familiar face appeared. Wrinkled hands, gentle eyes, and a nervous smile. "Maria," the woman whispered, It's been years, but I never forgot you." Maria's eyes widened. "Miss Jenkins." The elderly woman nodded, tears already in her eyes. "They only let me foster you for 6 months, but I prayed for you every day since. I kept your drawings. I still have the birthday card you made me with pasta glued to the front." Maria choked on a sob as memories rushed back. Warm milk before bed, bedtime songs, soft arms that hugged instead of hitting. She reached for her and broke down. "I thought I imagined you. I thought I made you up." "You didn't," Ms. Jenkins whispered as she held her. "I was real, and I never stopped loving you." As they stepped inside, another figure entered, a young man in his 20s, with a nervous grin and a toolkit in his hand. "This is Caleb," Ethan said. "He helps run my foundation. I also build really bad IKEA furniture," Caleb added with a laugh. "But I heard you needed shelves, so." Maria chuckled softly for the first time in what felt like years. Soon the small living room came alive with motion. Caleb assembling a bookshelf as Hope crawled around curiously. Ms. Jenkins humming while stirring oatmeal in the kitchen. Ethan hanging photos on the wall. One photo in particular stopped Maria in her tracks. It was the picture, the one from their childhood, newly framed, to kids in old clothes. One hand over the other like a promise. Her fingers touched the glass. "They told me I had no one," she said quietly. But they were wrong. Later that afternoon, they all gathered in the living room. Ethan sat beside her, holding a plain black box. Inside were letters, dozens of them. "I wrote you every year on your birthday," he said. "I didn't know where to send them, so I just kept them." Maria opened one carefully. It was dated when she turned 16. "Dear Maria, I hope you're warm tonight. I hope someone told you that you matter. I wish I could be there. I wish I could protect you the way I promised. If you're out there, I hope you're still fighting, because I am too." Her hands shook. Tears spilled freely now. She didn't try to stop them. "I used to think I was forgotten," she whispered. "Turns out, someone was remembering me all along." That night, the dinner table was full. There was laughter, real laughter, Hope giggling at Caleb's goofy faces, Ms. Jenkins telling old stories about how Maria used to insist the moon followed her home. Ethan watched it all quietly, a soft smile on his face. This was what wealth couldn't buy. A table with family, a home with history, a sister who once was lost, now found. As Maria tucked Hope into bed later that night, she kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "You'll never grow up feeling alone. Not while I'm breathing." She turned off the light and stepped into the hallway, only to find Ethan standing there, holding a small box. "What's this?" she asked. "A key," he said, "to the upstairs room. I thought that was storage. Not anymore. It's an office, a study, a space, for whatever you want it to be." Maria opened the door. Inside was a freshly painted room with a desk, a soft chair, a bookshelf filled with blank journals, and a corkboard already pinned with one photo, the same childhood picture. She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you doing all this?" Ethan stepped forward, eyes wet. "Because I lost you once. I'm not losing you again." That night, as the house fell quiet and the stars blinked softly above Queens, Maria sat at the desk and picked up a pen. On the first page of a journal, she wrote, "Weeks passed. Life at the little house in Queens slowly began to feel normal." Maria started each morning with soft music playing while she prepared breakfast. Hope giggled louder now, her tiny footsteps thudding as she learned to run. And Ethan, who had once lived behind iron gates and layers of security, now visited almost every day, not with gifts, but with time. They had spent so many years apart. Now they were building a rhythm, late night chats, inside jokes, silent understanding when memories got too heavy. But something still gnawed at Ethan. He wasn't the same man he had been before he found Maria. Wealth and legacy suddenly felt empty if they weren't used for something greater. Finding his sister opened something inside him, a question he couldn't ignore anymore. How many Marias were still out there? How many children were lost in the cracks of a broken system? How many had given up hope? How many had a sibling somewhere in the world, wondering if they'd ever reunite? One evening, Ethan sat across from Maria at the kitchen table, a laptop open in front of him. "I want to start something," he said. "Not another business. A mission." Maria raised an eyebrow. "What kind of mission?" "A foundation, but not like the usual charity stuff. I want to find lost siblings, reunite separated families, give foster kids real tools to survive and grow, not just beds and paperwork." He hesitated, and "I want you to lead it with me." Maria stared, stunned. "Me? You survived more than most people could imagine," Ethan said. "You know the system. You know what it feels like to be invisible. Who better to speak for them?" Maria looked down, her thoughts spinning. "I've never led anything," she said quietly. "I was a shadow for most of my life." Ethan smiled softly. "Exactly, and now it's your turn to shine." They spent the next few weeks planning. They met with social workers, foster parents, adoption counselors, and trauma experts. Maria shared her story raw, unfiltered, and people listened. Really listened. For the first time, she saw her pain become power. They named the foundation Hope Found, not just after Maria's daughter, but after every child who had ever needed someone to find them. The launch day arrived. Ethan booked a modest venue, intentionally keeping the event small. No celebrities, no media circus, just survivors, advocates, and families who knew what it meant to be broken and still breathe. Maria stood behind the podium in a simple navy dress, her fingers trembling slightly. Hope clutched her leg, wide-eyed and innocent. "I was a forgotten child," she began, voice steady despite the tears already forming in the crowd. "I slept under bridges. I gave birth alone. And I believed, truly believed, that no one was ever coming for me." She paused, looked toward Ethan. "But someone did." Her voice grew stronger. "And now, we're coming for the rest. For the boys waiting at the window. For the girls who hummed themselves to sleep. For the ones who never stopped hoping even when hope hurt." Applause echoed like thunder. And in the back row, a young girl with a missing front tooth turned to her caseworker and whispered, "She's like me." Over the next months, the foundation began making real change. Hotlines were launched for separated siblings. Search programs used Ethan's tech to reconnect families across states. Emergency funds were given to aging out teens so they wouldn't end up homeless. Maria's story became a short film, shown in schools and foster agencies across the country. Every day, letters poured in. One said, "Because of you, I found my brother after 12 years. He thought I was dead. We talk every night now." Another simply said, "Thank you for making us visible." One night, Maria sat on her porch, watching Hope chase lightning bugs in the yard. Ethan sat beside her, tired but content. "You changed everything," he said. She shook her head. "No, we did." He looked at her, proud. "You know what you are now." "What?" "The sister I always needed, and the voice they always silenced." Maria smiled as Hope climbed into her lap. And now, she said, they're listening. 3 years later, everything had changed. Maria stood at the entrance of Hope Found's newest building, a state-of-the-art family resource center in Brooklyn. It wasn't made of marble or glass. It was warm, child-friendly, filled with light and laughter. Walls were lined with colorful murals, painted by kids who once believed they had no voice. Now, their stories lived in color. Maria's journey from invisible girl to public figure had not been easy. The cameras still made her nervous. The speeches didn't come naturally, but the cause, that part burned in her bones. She walked past a therapy room where a little girl held a stuffed animal and bravely told her story for the first time. Maria paused, watching through the glass. That girl was her, just a few years ago. Except now, she wasn't alone. Hope Found had grown beyond what anyone imagined. Over 20,000 reunions of separated siblings, emergency shelters for teens, aging out of foster care with nowhere to go. Education grants, trauma-informed therapy programs, and even a mobile team that located missing foster children and reconnected them with lost family. Maria had become the face of it all, but not for fame. She was proof that broken systems didn't have to break people. Ethan, once a CEO at the top of the corporate world, had now stepped back. He had handed over his companies to trusted partners and shifted his full attention to Hope Found. He wasn't just Maria's brother anymore. He was her co-founder, her protector, her second chance. Sometimes the work was heavy, but moments like this made it worth it. Later that evening, Maria and Ethan attended a quiet dinner with supporters and caseworkers. No gala, no press, just people who understood the mission. As dessert arrived, an older social worker clinked her glass and stood up. 3 years ago, I met a woman who changed everything. Not with money, not with fame, but with truth. Her story made me change how I see every file on my desk. She turned to Maria. You gave the lost children a face. You gave them a voice. And for that, you gave us all a better future. Everyone stood and applauded. Maria, overwhelmed, stood slowly and smiled. I just didn't want another little girl to wait by the door with her bag packed, thinking someone might come for her, she said softly. Now I know they will. That night, Maria and Ethan returned to her home. Hope was now 6, curled up in bed with a flashlight and a book about brave girls who changed the world. Maria kissed her forehead. Are you one of those girls, Mama? Hope asked. Maria smiled. I guess so. Hope grinned. Then I will be too. Downstairs, Ethan poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to Maria on the porch. You know, he said, when I first found you, I thought I was helping you. But the truth is, you saved me too. Maria looked out at the stars, her voice gentle. We saved each other. The porch light glowed behind them, casting soft halos on the steps where Hope's chalk drawings still lived, smiling. Stick figures holding hands, labeled me, Mama, and Uncle Ethan. They sat there in silence, not needing to say anything more. The legacy had already begun. The auditorium buzzed with quiet anticipation. Rows of chairs filled with foster youth, survivors, caseworkers, and advocates from across the country. Banners lined the walls, each bearing a name. Resilience, Recovery, Reunion. The largest banner of all read, Hope Found, National Foster Unity Summit. At the center of it all stood Maria, dressed simply, standing tall, her locket still around her neck. She took the stage not as a victim but as a voice, a woman who had walked through fire and come out with open arms. She looked out into the crowd and saw so many versions of herself. The quiet girl in the back, Ra gripping her backpack. The teenage boy pretending not to care, but listening closely. The single mother rocking a child with eyes full of silent prayer. And then she saw Ethan, front row, smiling, eyes glassy, heart full. Maria stepped to the mic. The lights dimmed slightly, and she began. There are people in this room who have slept in cars, in shelters, in silence. Her voice was steady, filled with truth. There are people here who have been forgotten by systems, judged by statistics, and labeled as burdens. I was one of them. She paused, letting the words sink in. But someone found me, not just with money, with presence, with belief, with love. She turned toward Ethan. My brother saved me, yes, but more than that, he reminded me that I was worth saving. Applause filled the room, but she raised her hand gently to speak again. This summit isn't about me. It's about every child still waiting to be seen, every sibling still dreaming of a reunion, every survivor who hasn't found their voice yet. She took a deep breath, voice catching slightly. And it's about my daughter Hope. She is the reason I never gave up. At that, Hope ran onto the stage, smiling wide, and wrapped her arms around Maria's waist. The audience melted. Maria looked down, kissed the top of her head, and whispered, "You'll never be alone." Later that night, after the summit ended, Maria and Ethan stood beneath the empty banner in the quiet hall. The stage lights were off now. The seats were empty, but something hung in the air: legacy. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Ethan asked. Maria nodded slowly. "Every day. You changed the world, you know." Maria smiled faintly. "We did?" He reached into his pocket and handed her a final envelope. Inside was a letter written in Ethan's familiar handwriting. "To Maria, my first promise, my first loss, and my greatest found. Treasure." Maria pressed the letter to her heart, eyes glistening. "I think Mom would be proud," she whispered. Ethan stepped closer. "She would see her strength in you." That night, Maria tucked Hope into bed and sat at her desk. She opened a fresh journal. On the first page, she wrote, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning of everything we never thought we'd have." And for the first time in her life, Maria didn't feel like she was healing from a broken past. She was building an unbreakable future. The ballroom was quiet, not because no one was speaking, but because everyone was listening. On stage stood a poised young woman in her 20s, her curly hair tied back, her voice clear and calm. She looked out at the sea of faces: leaders, youth, survivors, and smiled gently. "My name," she said, "is Hope." A ripple moved through the audience. Everyone knew her story. The baby once wrapped in towels on a rainy sidewalk. The little girl who learned to walk between courtroom benches and shelter floors. The daughter of the woman who built a movement. Hope continued. "My mother used to say she was born in the shadows, but she died in the light. Her name was Maria Colan. She was the reason thousands of children today are no longer invisible." Behind her, a screen lit up with photos. Maria speaking at schools, hugging foster children, smiling beside Ethan at the opening of another Hope Found Center. Hope turned slightly toward the crowd. She wasn't perfect. She had fears, scars, and nights when she nearly gave up. But she kept going, because someone believed in her, and because she believed in me. She looked down at the locket she wore. Maria's locket. "My uncle Ethan, who now watches from heaven with her, once said, 'Family is who shows up,' and they both did." She paused, eyes misty but steady. "I stand here today because my mother turned her pain into power. She found her brother, found herself, and gave the rest of us the courage to believe in more." Hope smiled. "And so, from her name and mine, I leave you with this truth. Hope was never lost. It was waiting to be found." Applause thundered. The audience rose, and as she stepped down from the podium, the lights above glowed just a little brighter, like Maria was smiling down, proud, peaceful, and finally home.